fact, welcome all the students who are there. I mean, my lecture is really aimed at them. I mean, I always feel somewhat, you know, energetic when I address the students because they are the ones who are the future for us. So it's mainly addressed to them, and let's see how it proceeds. So before I go to the sharing the slides, uh, as Mr. Mishra was saying, we are at a crossroad of different kinds of ideas. As you know, that in some quarters you will hear that India is a powerhouse for services, all kinds of service, not only IT. We have financial service, business services, we have travel and tourism, we have transportation. In fact, you'll be surprised to know that IT is not the biggest revenue earner for India when it's concerned with the trade and in general. Which services earned us the most? It's really transportation, travel and tourism. These earn us more than the IT for that matter. But anyway, IT is, I'm not trying to minimize the IT. The point is, and this really bothered me for some time, that when we are talking so much about the services sector, can we think about services sector as some kind of a vertical which is quite independent of the other verticals, which are basically the other two sectors in the economy, namely the industrial or the secondary sector, manufacturing for that matter, and the agriculture. So can we think about that when we think or when we talk about services-led growth? And in fact, there is no mean achievement what we have done in services. What we couldn't do in goods and services, think about the what we sell to the world. We do not sell even 1% of total world trade in goods and goods, really, goods trade, if you think about the goods trade. But in services trade, we have reached more than 10% in something like 20 years. And goods trade, we are participating in maybe it's about 70 years we are participating. So that's no mean achievement. So somewhere lies a strength, a great strength which India has in services sector. So there is nothing wrong in saying that India should really strengthen the service sector. But the point which is important is if we think all these three verticals like services, manufacturing, and agriculture as three independent, uh, you know, uh, they are independent sectors, something like that. Watertight compartments. One doesn't look at the other. If we think about that, then we'll be mistaken. Now, obviously, you know that, in fact, those who are in, advanced undergraduate level or master's level or PhD level, it's very well known that what we call interconnectedness, interrelationship among sectors. So there are very good theories, which I will not repeat here. It's just an introduction which I want to give. That a long time back, Arthur Lewis and then Gus Ranis and Fays and others, very well-known economists, and before that maybe Ragnar Marx and others, very well-known economists, they tried to point out that there's a relationship between the two. After all, if you look at the beginning of the world, even the developed countries, it's all agriculture, right? And then the industry came. And industry came doesn't mean that industry can grow without the help of the agriculture. Two ways it dependent on agriculture. One is the labor force. Obviously, you need labor force from the agriculture. The other is the market. If you produce manufactured goods, where would you sell it? So without thinking about agriculture, without thinking about how to develop the agricultural sector, you cannot think of developing the industrial sector. So industry and agriculture had a relationship between the two. And then came services. As the economy develops, you need services. And just to set the tone, uh, any manufacturing activity or agriculture, like to think about that. In fact, suppose you are buying a perfume from a store, or you are buying a car, right? That's very much manufactured goods. Or you're buying agricultural products, say, uh, you know, potato chips, for example. It's manufactured, but it's very agro-based for that matter. You need services, right? I mean, this has to be transported from factory to the wholesaler, then from the wholesaler to the retailers, from the retailers to the shops from where you are buying it. It's all service, transportation service, warehouse service, which we call logistics, right? And when a company is running all this, They need services like accounting, they need financial services, right? And then all kinds of services you can have. Then after sales service, repair service, maintenance service. So it's all, both of them go hand in hand. So when we talk about a manufacturing sector or even agricultural sector, when we are consuming, and remember the consumers are the biggest uh, source of demand in an economy. In fact, in India right now, it's about 61% of total consumption is by households, right? So clearly, when we are consuming, the goods do not come flying in the air. They come all through different kinds of services. Although it's produced in a manufacturing unit, maybe a factory somewhere or on the field, without services, you cannot enjoy them. So it's clear that they are all related. They are all related to each other. So service sector, the title which I have given, I will go to the slide presentation in a moment. But uh, the whether service-led growth can be a standalone strategy, and as you can understand, it cannot be because they are all intertwined. I mean, there is a clear interconnection between services and manufacturing. So why does this question arise? Because sometimes when we talk in a way that maybe we can push the services on its path without bothering about to take the manufacturing along with it or take the agriculture along with it. Now, there are two things which, before I go to the slide presentation, any sector, right? There are two sides. One is the supply side, the other is the demand side. And if you look at the demand side, there are two types of demand, which is very important. One type of demand we call final demand. Anybody who has read macroeconomics, the basics, right? There are two types of things. One is called intermediate type of demand. The other is called final demand. The final demand is something where you consume the good, right? Anything which it may be a durable good, it may be a non-durable good, right? Even a car, when you buy, it's not called an investment goods. It's really a good which you consume. Only houses, remember, construction, houses. Houses are not called consumption goods. It's an investment good. There are reasons behind that, but I'm not really going into macro aspect of it. So basically, all goods for that matter, if you classify that way, there are two sides. One is the final, one is the intermediate. The question is, services also have that kind of a demand. One type of demand is direct consumption by households. For example, if you buy an internet service, Wi-Fi in your house, then it's a clear consumption in a way that you are buying it. It's you. You are not using it for further production. Although you might say it's going to my human capital formation, nobody takes it that way. Or suppose if you take, you hire a car from an agency to travel, say, from Bangalore to Mysuru or somewhere. The point is that's your final consumption. It's not for any further production. But suppose if the same car is used by a company who is producing, say, uh, something like a computer and wants to transport it somewhere, then that will be an intermediate product in the sense that's a service which is used to bring the computer from the manufacturing unit to the consumer is an intermediate service because it's counted again in further in the final cost of that good. So it's an intermediate service, an intermediate cost. The question which is most important, that since there are two types of demand, one primarily is made by the households, direct consumption of services, the other primarily made by production units, manufacturing mainly because manufacturing requires most of the services maybe, and then agriculture. So which type of demand is very important? Which one is the primary source of demand? If it is the household sector, is the primary source of demand, that if you want to propel the service sector growth on a very steady path where services sector will grow very fast, then you have to really look at this household sector, that they should be able to maintain the consumption, final consumption of services at a high level. Now it's the other way around. It was the intermediate demand made by manufacturing and agricultural sector. As I said, there are so many services you require so that the good comes from the manufacturing unit to your house. All kinds of services are needed. This is intermediate because this is counted again in the final cost of the good. Which one is primary? Which one is important? Because in one case, it should be the households who are the main source of demand for growth of services. On the other hand, is the manufacturing industrial sector and agricultural sector who should grow very fast so that the service sector has a demand. The two sources of demand are important. And that really is the preamble of what I will really talk. That if there are two types of demand, what's the composition of this? Say for every 100 rupees worth of services, it may be IT, it may be finance, it may be transport, travel, tourism, name it. If 100 rupees worth of things are sold, how much is demanded by households as a final expenditure? How much is demanded by the manufacture and agriculture sector as an intermediate service, which will be used up in their production finally so that the good reaches the consumer? Now, unless we have an idea about this, it's very difficult to suggest policies. That's the preamble. Now, let me try to see that whether I can share the slides, because sometimes sharing the slides is a big issue. I hope it will come there. Yeah, I think this is the one. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, visible, sir.
Coming, yeah. Right?
Yes, coming.
I go to the, I go to the, it's very clearly shown, right? No
yes,
problem?
Sir. Absolutely fine. No problem.
Great.
Yes.
No problem. So let me go to this. First, I want to mention something which is called Kuznets's law of transition of an economy. There's a book which was written by Simon Kuznets, Nobel laureate, one of the finest economists who worked on cross-country growth patterns. And he wrote a book on modern economic growth while he was teaching at Harvard University. While he was writing this book, his funding came from National Bureau of Economic Research. That's the main funding agency in the United States. And the director of that funding agency, Michael Mitchell, he was also a well-known economist at that time. His director, he said, why are you doing all this nonsense of cross-country? What use will this be? Look at the United States, what is going on. Why are you so interested about 130 countries, how they are moving between agriculture and this? Kuznets continued, and he produced a number of monographs, and then rest is history. Kuznets's law is not only something which is very well studied, but Kuznets himself got the Nobel Prize. Michael Mitchell didn't. But I'm not really putting, Mitchell in a wrong outlook or wrong view. Anyway, that's the history. That somehow, sometimes, great thinkers face resistance because nobody understood what they are doing. In fact, one other story is John Maynard Keynes. When he sat for the Indian Economic Service, they call it civil service, ICS, Indian Civil Service at that time. He failed in the economics paper. Why did he fail? Because he was thinking about general theory at that time, and nobody knew what general theory is. And he wrote something which people didn't understand, and he got something like 10 or 12 in the economics paper. Thanks God he got 10, 12. So he shifted to academics and didn't go as a civil service officer in India. And that's where we got the macroeconomics from Keynes. That's how things move. And Kuznets is one such example. And he divided the whole, all sectors in agriculture, forestry, fishing together. And then manufacturing sector, manufacturing, mining, and construction. And then the whole service sector. And let's call it AMS, the three sector, transportation, communications, commerce, public utilities. All right. And then over time, the first law, which Kuznets says, agricultural sector declines, mainly compensated by M sector. Why the manufacturing sector? All these theories which came up later. The Lewis's two-sector model, that how the manufacturing sector drew resources out of agricultural sector. And there's all these stories with economic historians have delved later on. Then in the third phase, both A and M sector have declining shares, all right, compensated by the rise of service sector. because the economy was growing into more sophistication. And so they require different kinds of services, and service sector had a faster growth of this. Now, there is three guys, Kongsamut, Rebello, and Zai. Sergio Rebello is an economist who wrote a lot on endogenous growth. Those who have studied masters, maybe a PhD, must have heard the name of Sergio Rebello, and his endogenous growth theory is very well known. And then Kongsamut and Zai. They looked at this data once again. And they said Kuznets's law did not apply to majority of the countries. Majority then is this independent developing nations, which were not independent one. Simon Kuznets was writing his story. Simon Kuznets ended his whole thing about 1956, 57. And then Kongsamut Rebello took another 40 years data, something like that. And they have this kind of a thing. Agriculture certainly declined, both in terms of employment and in terms of consumption expenditure. Final, as I was saying, the final expenditure, if you look at this, both declined, agriculture. Manufacturing, stable. Neither the employment rose very much, nor the share in consumption expenditure. It's coming of a static story. Services increased. So whatever decline was there in agriculture was more or less subsumed by services. And then manufacturing, some or others, stayed where they are. Some people called it a surprise, an exception, parable. Why manufacturing sector is somewhat stable. So if there was share of say 20% remain there for ages, while agriculture from a share of say 40, 50% has fallen to in developed countries now 4, 5%. In our countries is something like 15, 16, 17%, most of the developing countries. But services sector has grown very rapidly. Now, if if somebody, especially postgraduate students, if they're there, you're interested in Kongsamut's paper, I will not go much into this because I have a different kind of things which I want to say. Here's a model. The model says the main reason this happened is the income elasticity. When income was growing, empirically, if you look at this, then for 1% rise in income, expenditure on agriculture was going down and expenditure on services going up. So income elasticity of agriculture was negative, income elasticity of services was positive, and for manufacturing it's kind of a constant income elasticity. So 1% increase in income leads to some kind of 1% increase in manufacturing demand. But the other two has a decline and a rise in terms of income elasticity. Clear story. As you know, a demand function income is a very important parameter. If the income goes up, the whole demand curve shift to the right. And that's exactly what they have in mind. And it shifted in favor of services and shifted against the services sector. And apparently they have something else to say about this generalized balance growth. I just skipped that. Not really important. Now, this is somewhat an exception of what Kuznets has said. And let's go to Indian economy, because that's where our interest lies. If you look at the Indian economy, I took it from the wonderful graphs, which I took it from IMF e-library. All of you can locate at this. It's an article by Alonso and McDonald, two persons. And if you go to Google and if you look at the IMF working papers, you will get that. So very, a very recent article, which came out in 2024. Look at this. This is the contribution to real value added. This is the GDP share. We look at the GDP share. This red is the services. See the amount by which it is growing. It's growing, right? And if you look at the manufacturing as well as construction, because construction is part of manufacturing now, by the national income classification as per United Nations. If you look at that, more or less constant. It's something like 15%, almost fixed. And if you look at the agriculture, the blue thing, it has gone down from 40 to is average of many countries. Sorry, it's Indian average. It's 40% was there in 80 to 89. From 2010 to 19, it has gone down below 20%. That's the story for GDP share. If you look at the employment share is something like agriculture or agriculture related sector still has a high amount of employment, right? It's like more than 60%, 80 to 89. It has gone down not much. It's about 40% plus, 45% maybe whole of 2010-19. Manufacturing, in fact, services sector, although it has grown so much in terms of income elasticity, etc., in terms of GDP share, its employment share of employment hasn't grown much. As you can see, the red part hasn't grown that much. It was something like 20%. It has grown to something like close to, say, 30%. But so agriculture still it gives the wherewithal for many job seekers. May not be they are cultivating, they are having what is called non-farm activities. But again, I don't want to go into that story. It's just the snapshot story of what is happening. And this is something like a very schematic things. Now, let's focus on the service sector. Did we see? Service sector has grown quite a bit in terms of its share in GDP, not so much in terms of its share in employment. So let's first try to understand what's going on on the product side. That means why it has grown so much in terms of GDP share. Then perhaps we will touch upon the employment as we can, as we proceed. But my focus more will be on the GDP share part, why the share is growing and who is propelling that. The employment part is a little different than what I intend to do now. So maybe I will touch upon that. As I said, again, if you look at this classification, there are two sources of service sector demand. One is the domestic, the other is the foreign. Because you have heard about so much about it, and if you are located in Bengaluru, you know very well that this business process outsourcing, BPOs, IPOs, we hear so much about that. So we hear that IT is catering to so many of the countries in the world, especially say Europe and United States. So maybe the foreign demand is a source because the foreign demand to foreign countries are coming in the IT sector. That's propelling the growth of the services. The other part is the domestic, who are catering to domestic services, right? So you think about domestic services, many of these are called non-traded services. The cost of trading that would be like unskilled services, right? Unskilled labor. It's very difficult to bring those unskilled labor in the purview of trade. So these are called non-traded. Most of the services for that matter are domestically consumed maybe. Domestic has final demand and intermediate demand. There are, as I said, there are two sources of demand of that. Foreign also has two sources, final demand and intermediate. Question is, which source of demand is more important, domestic or foreign? Which type of demand played a more important role, final demand or intermediate demand? So domestic or foreign, final or intermediate. If intermediate demand is important, how important was the role of manufacturing? So within intermediate, you have using services in the production process so that it will be taken care of in the final cost. It may be manufacturing, it may be agriculture, it may be services itself. One service may need another service for this to be finally reaching on the table of the consumer. So intermediate demand, which part? How far important manufacturing is? Scale of production depends on the market size. What is the growth rate and composition of this market? So market really is, I would say, in terms of the market, we look more for the final expenditure, the market for the households, how far that is going. Now, let's first try to understand the domestic versus external and domestic. Which one is more important? Because we have a misconception, I've seen it among many, that our service sector is growing because USA and Europe is demanding so much of IT services. Let's see whether that is correct or not. Now, claims is a database which is maintained by Reserve Bank of India, KLEMS, big term in that. Uh, uh, then if you look at this clearly, it is the domestic sector which is the driver of services sector, because services sector's share of services export as percent of GDP is 8.88%. Look at the second line. If you look at the GDP, how much is the share of service export in GDP? 8.88. Now, in the gross value added, service sector share in 2020-21, service sector share, all services, exported or not exported, the service sector as a whole, its share was 63.18%. So if it's 63.18 for the whole, that's the claims database. The whole share is now 63.18 in 2021. In 2022 is just 1 year hence. Share of service export is only almost 9%. So you can understand 54% of this share in GDP is not by export. So if 63% is the total, 9% is export, then what is the rest? The rest is from the domestic sector, right? So it's a domestic sector which drives the service sector growth. So first, I won't say misconception, but first clarity which we need is that external sector may be important, but it's not the real driving force for the growth of the service sector. IT is a minuscule part. I wouldn't say minuscule, it's not the most important part of the growth of the service. It may be important, it's about third now or fourth now in driving. So it's domestic sector, which we should look at. Now, the share of largest item, if you look at the kind of things which we say, I just skip this. You can have these things later on, just to have an idea of which kind of services we export, right? So, uh, just take a moment to look at it. One segment which we call is something like travel, transport, and travel. So services is 4.3%, which is composed of travel and transport. It's not that high. Yearly growth rate is quite a bit, but it's not the major force. Then there are other services, insurance service, finance. This is what we export. Computer services, we do export it a lot, right? So in the world, our share is 11.7%. That's in 2022. And this item share is Indian export is almost 31%. So computer services, major factor, which we export to the rest of the world. And then there are other business services, which is 38.9% weight in that. That includes R&D services, professional and management consulting services. These things are all. So professional and management consulting services is something where we are also growing quite a bit. Okay, it's technological and other managerial kind of consulting companies like say TCS. When they give some kind of a consulting service, it's included in the consulting services. So this is a breakup of what's going on in the external front. But again, keep in mind, this is just as an example that where do we really export? Wherein lies our strength in the export? But that's not the driving force. Driving force is the domestic sector. Now, I skipped this one. That what are the reasons that, as I said, the export of services has grown tremendously in the last 20 years? Reasons. Skip this for the sake of time. Now let's come to this, the main question which I want to touch upon. As our registrar sir was saying that there's Make in India, Indian products, India should get a large chunk of manufacturing activities. There is a scheme which is now is a PLI scheme, the productivity linked incentive scheme. Lots of schemes that India should be a manufacturing powerhouse now. That's the in thing, starting from a lot of stress on the MSME sector and the large scale industries. India should be in the map in the manufacturing. So a lot of funding is going to the manufacturing sector, a lot of incentive is going, lot of duty structure is restructured in a way, in the sense that our industries, our manufacturing sector should not face any constraint in import of parts component, essential parts and components. Okay, so manufacturing, that's one of the things which we are focusing very, very dearly. And let's see, if we stress on manufacturing, are we ignoring services? That's the main issue. That if funding is going to manufacturing, the whole country, the nation is putting manufacturing as the thing right now where we should concentrate. Are we ignoring? Are we uh, neglecting the services sector? Are we doing something a harm to services sector? That's the issue. Now, Rupa Chanda is a very well-known economist who was working in IIM Bangalore for quite long time. She was a professor there in Indian Institute of Management in the Bangalore. Now she has moved to UNSCAP in Bangkok, friend of mine, in fact. And she has a term, and she says that if we look at, she was looking at the export because she was an international trade specialist. I take this because this is an observation which might be important for our domestic sector as well. She says that if you look at the manufacturing sector uh, and their export items, then some of these sectors are having more services in their total inputs. So more service is used in the export bundle, which India is exporting. Service, not a service sector, any kind of manufactured exports, all kinds of exports which we are doing. If you look at this, then the content, the service content as an input in those exports have gone up, which he is saying servicification. But at the same time, I again skip this value contribution. It's but the main this thing which I want to really stress, the fast growing sector. You look at this thing, this particular bullet. The fast growing sectors like computer and information services, other business services, financial service, IT, computer related services have not contributed any significantly to increased values to manufactured export. And that's really is something like a dampener to this whole thing. That IT is growing fast. Computers, their services, the software services, growing fast. Other business services, professional consulting services are growing fast. How far they are being used by manufacturing units, right, who are exporting. Her observation, the poor services manufacturing link may also reflect challenges affecting services, including challenges related to capacity. So her main point is manufacturing sector in India is not using that much of computer and information services, which is produced in India. A lot of this information and computer service are hired by foreigners from outside. The Indian manufacturing sector is not using that much of services of computer and information, although there are, if you look at the overall service as an input, that might be growing, but some of the fastest growing sectors like computer information is not used that much. Maybe transportation is used more. So if you look at the transportation cost of manufacturing sector, they have cost classification, right? How much is for transportation service, how much is for labor, how much is for other inputs. Some of these transportation services or other kind of services are growing, but not the fastest growing ones. They are demanded more outside. Now, given that, again, question, if we stress so much on the manufacturing sector, then are we ignoring the fastest growing sector in the service sector? Because after all, this manufacturing sector, looking at the export side with the manufacturing exports, which are not using that fast growing sectors that much. So big question again. Uh, if I now look at the, it's a TIVA database, I'm not going into too much, is the organization, European country, OECD, they publish a database. Now, if you look at the database, then domestic value added share from service sector or total exports, out of total exports, all right, how much is the share of service sector in that? Out of the total export, service sector share has gone up from 35.8 to 51.2. Whereas manufactured exports, where services is used, exports, which are going to the manufactured exports, that has grown very miserly from 16% to 17.7%. So this manufacturing exports means services used up in the goods which are being exported from India. That hasn't grown much. The overall exports, if you look at it, the service sector share has grown from 36% to 51% of the service sector in the total export. Manufactured is not using that many services. So question now comes up again. Does so much stress on manufacturing creating a kind of a barrier for the service sector growth? In fact, we are putting so much resources to manufacturing. Shouldn't it be more resources to services directly? Because that's where we are growing so fast. So manufacturing, stress on manufacturing, is it a good strategy we are following? Let's delve into that a little bit more. This is, Ikenrid is an economist who works in the World Bank, and Poonam Gupta, who works now in the National Council of Applied Economic Research. These two economists produce papers using what is called an input-output analysis. Nowadays, input-output analysis is something which is not taught almost in many universities. People haven't heard much about input-output analysis. The whole idea is that you have matrices at a big matrix where it's maybe 130 sector matrix, 100 sector matrix, where you divide the whole economy in different sectors. So 100 sectors. And you try to find out which sector is selling how much to the other sector as it. So that way you know that which sector is demanding from which other sector. So they divided the whole thing into, these are the manufacturing sectors, these are the services sectors, these are the agriculture sectors. And then they tried to find out this service unit per unit of output in agriculture industry in India. So in agriculture, according to them, it's an old study, 93 to 2003, it's very low. It's less than 10%, 0.07. So agriculture is not using much of the service. But if you look at the industry also, this is the input per unit. It's not percentage, it's the input per unit, 0.07. Industry, it's 0.84, which has gone down to 0.55, it's 0.72. So for every 1 unit which you produce in terms of rupees in the industry sector, this 0.72 is spent on, so 72% of that, it's 72 paisa, you can say, is spent on service input, 0.72. It's difficult to understand the unit, but just look at this. If it is a very low percentage, then it's not a very high thing. So what they are trying to say, that look, agriculture, industry and services are not very well related. You can have a lot of stress on industry, but their input which they are taking from industry services sector is very low. But the study stopped in 2003. Now, what I tried to show, and this is something which we calculated, if I take a ratio of share of 2021's value added to 80-81, right? And 2010-11 value added to 80-81. So I am taking this, that whatever is produced of the value added in 2020-21 and the value which was there in 80-81, I am taking a ratio. So suppose 80-81, it was 100, how much it has grown to 2021 in something like 40 years. See, the agriculture, the ratio is less than 1. That means agriculture has, the value has fallen, in fact. What was there in 80-81, 2021 is a fraction. So they are producing less. For industry is 1.18, right? They are producing more compared to 80-81 in terms of value added. And in terms of services, it's 2.32. And what is important is, if you take 10 years away from this, so instead of 2021, if you take 2010-11, so just 10 years, the last 10 years, if you take it away, see the other values are very close, but the services value, it was just 1.54, it has instead of 2.32. So if you take 10 years, add 10 years to 2010-11 figure, the service sector growth in real value added simply jumps tremendously. Employment, as I said, services sector hasn't done much. So the main reason I am quoting this is that Eichenkren and Gupta, their article was taken to be almost like the final word. The final word is this: these two sectors are not much related. So if you stress industry, they are not using services much. So if you think that if you stress industry, they will have lot of services as their input, is a myth. It's not true. What I'm trying to say, their whole thing stopped in 2003. But the main thrust of the services sector growth really came in the decade of 2020 to 2010 to 20. So that 10 years, lot of dynamics happened in the services sector. So they stopped the whole thing before the dynamics started coming in. So what they were saying may not be entirely correct. That industry is not using services, using very low amount of services. That might have changed. So let's delve a little bit more into that. Now, again, for lack of time, I will just point out one thing. This is about which sector in service. Service has many types of service. So there's trade service, transport service, financial service, business service, all this, education, etc. So if I look at this, I will just have one thing, which is my main analysis point. If you look at this, more or less, if you took the value between 2021 and 8081, which sector has, share has grown most? If you look at this last figures, the share has grown most, in fact, between these 2 years, these 10 years, 1011 and 2021. So within these 10 years, if you look at this, it's 3 point something in the business service sector share, it has grown to 6, almost doubled. No other sector has grown so much. So which sector is propelling the growth in service? Business services. So business services is the main thing. And then there is some like a little bit, if you look at this, it goes to financial services. Not much, it's almost similar, the ratios. And so education a little bit high in that way, but the business service, that's the main driving force, which is driving the whole thing in India. Now, the question is, who is using business service more? Obviously, the business. It's not the final demand, right? It's not that households are demanding too much of business services, that the growth which strikes most for the growth of service sector is the business services, which has grown tremendously between, say, 2010 and 2020. 10 years. It has grown tremendously. And again, I skip this because this will require a lot of explanation. Main thing is that when you look at the growth of this, is the sector growing when you look at the productivity of these sectors? Service sector, is the service sector growing because there's an internal reorganization of this? That means, say, trade sector is going down and business services is going. That's within service sector, something is happening. The other is, lot of resources are moving out from non-service to service. Which one is happening in India? Is it that within service sector, there are reorganization? Some of the services are going down, some of the services are going up. So services which are going down are releasing resources, both financial, non-financial resources, that's taken up by these growing sectors. Or it may be that the manufacturing sector is going down, releasing a lot of financial and non-financial resources, that's going to the service sector. What we find is, it's the reorganization within service sector, which is the most important thing, which is really how the productivity or production in service sector is going. So again, big question. If the manufacturing sector is not releasing resources, right? So how can we say that manufacturing sector growth is important for the service sector? Now, one thing is clear. The service sector has its own dynamics. They do not depend on manufacturing. So manufacturing sector, it doesn't matter whether manufacturing sector grows or it shrinks. Service sector has its own dynamics. It's growing by reorganizing itself. Some of the services are going down. For example, the public administration. This is going down steadily, the government service sector. Trade, constant. Some of these are growing. Business services, taking a lot of resources away. And that's how the service sector is growing. Now, what again, I skip some of this. And this is the last part of the thing, and I will really be very sketchy on this, just to give you an idea. As I said, the only way where I can have a clear answer that how much does the manufacturing sector, as we have seen, that it's not that manufacturing sector is shrinking and the resources are going to services. Service sector is going because some of the services are going down and some of the services are going up. So reorganization within the service sector, which is properly. But then, obviously, manufacturing sector is not going down in that way. That's a different issue. But the point is, if the manufacturing sector is growing as well as service sector is growing, some of the services are going down, some of the services are going up. How much does the manufacturing sector contribute to the growth of those service sectors which are growing? So if I say, for example, transportation is going down a little bit and business services going up, or computers are going up, then it's true that within service sector, reorganization is going. But then the growth of business sector, business services, or growth of computers, or growth of transportation, how much is contributed by manufacturing instead of final demand? That means what we are buying directly. So several things, two or three things we are trying to understand. One is reorganization within service sector is important. That's very important. It's not that they are, taking out resources from manufacturing. There's no contest on that. But then, when some of the services are growing in the reorganization process, how much they depend on the household final expenditure and how much they depend on the growing manufacturing sector in terms of its output. That manufacturing sector is growing, how much they are, demanding some of these fast-moving or growing services. If they have a huge role to play in this, then it's important. We have to be careful in saying it's a standalone thing, that they are growing on their own. They are growing because exports are growing. They are growing because BPO and other IT services demand originating from US and UK. That's really driving the things. No, it's driven by domestic, and within domestic, maybe the growth of the manufacturing sector because they require intermediate inputs. Now, this is the stories about input output, and very little time to understand, but I give this because if you use the slide, I will just send the slide. If you can see the slide later on, it might help. Basically, this is what is happening. If you look at this, there are three sectors: agriculture, manufacturing, service, and there are three sectors here: agriculture, manufacturing, service. If you look vertically, this is how agriculture is demanding inputs from agriculture, manufacturing, services. So vertical, how much the agriculture is taking inputs from agriculture, manufacturing, services in production. If you look horizontally, this is something like agriculture, some goods are produced in agriculture. How much is used up in consumption in the agricultural sector, manufacturing sector, and service? So horizontally, how much agriculture is being distributed among these sectors? And vertically, in producing the agricultural sector, how much inputs are required from agriculture, manufacturing, and services? So horizontally, how much is distributed among different sectors, mainly as final expenditure? Vertically, how much you are demanding from one sector in order to produce one unit of output, how much you require inputs from agriculture, manufacturing, and services. Three sectors, there are three different types of. Now, backward linkage, and that's important. We want to calculate when manufacturing sector is growing. Look at these coefficients which we can calculate. This is supply unit tables that's published by the government of India, where all these figures are available. That when manufacturing sector is producing one unit, how much input they require from agriculture, from manufacturing, from services. For every three sectors, you get this. And disaggregated. Different kinds of manufacturing activities are given and these coefficients are mentioned. So what is important, and we are trying to find out, that in terms of agriculture, if agriculture produces one unit more in GDP, how much agricultural goods they require as input, how much of manufacturing, how much services. Similar for manufacturing or service. Now I go to this table. I think this table is visible. Now you see that this is the backward linkage of service, and that's really surprising, and this is most important. Backward linkage coefficients, forget about that. Share of manufacturing sector in the backward linkage service. That means if manufacturing sector I mean, if construction and construction services is growing. So suppose a house is built and all kinds of services are required, electrical service, masonry service, all this. How much manufacturing goods they need? This is this figure. So backward linkage of services means, if you look at this vertical of the services. So if 1 unit of extra service is to be produced in construction, how much you require of the manufacturing sector output? It's quite a bit. If you look at this, in 2010, 11, 12, 38.27% of all inputs which they need came from manufacturing. It has been somewhat less. It has gone down to 28%. So if you look at this, you can see a number of different kinds of manufacturing inputs which are going to service sector. So it's service sector. If you want to produce more, how much more manufacturing input you require? So computer related service, you require 9% more of manufacturing input. So surprising, because computer related services, software services, so its manufacturing is not that much of required. Is another kind of service which you are doing. It's software production using these services. Other business services also, and this is if you want to produce more business services, how much you require from manufacturing sector. Other business services does not require too much of manufacturing input output. So suppose you want to give consulting services or you to give IT service. Do you require a lot of manufactured goods for that? No, really not. Maybe you require a computer, a system. That's what you require. The rest is all services, right? So service, in order to produce service, you require services. But some of the services require some amount of manufactured goods. For example, gas. Gas is taken as a service. This connection of either piped gas or the gas which are using. This is called a service. Supply. Production of gas is something, but the gas which is used up in households, this is a service which is produced. That requires a lot of manufacturing activities in the sense that it requires bottling plants and all this. So going down, I did the same for manufacturing units. So there are so many sectors of manufacturing, right? So in order to produce 1 unit extra good in manufactured, so suppose you are trying to produce 1 unit more of silk yarn or say carpet weaving. You want to have one more unit of carpet weaving. That means woven carpet which you are making, or ready-made garments. One additional t-shirt you are trying to produce. Okay. So one additional t-shirt you are trying to produce. How much service is required in that? So just go in this. See, go to the right. In 2011-12, in order to produce 1 unit additional garment, just 5% of service out of total cost, 5% came from service. If you go down 8% in 1560, you go to 1920, it's 12%. So maybe service sector is growing because it's getting a little bit more automated. It's requiring a little bit more sophisticated service, maybe more computers, more online, digitalized, etc. But not much. Look at this. All these figures, so low. Instead, if you look at the services, a lot more manufacturing was required to produce service. But if you look at the manufacturing units and go down to different kinds, it's just 12%, 13%. That's almost the highest. So in order to produce 1 unit more hand tools, how much service you require? What kind of service? As I said, transportation, logistics, accounting, financial service. Out of total cost, that means 1 unit more, just 12% of that goes to service. 88% goes to manufacturing itself, or mines, or machineries, or whatever. Go down to so many sectors everywhere. The quantity, the backward linkage. That means if you increase manufacturing sector, the amount of services which is required is 10%, 12%, 9%. So what would you say? And whatever I wrote, I just summing it up in words. In order to produce services, so just to wrap it up in that, service sector has a dynamics which is reorganization within this. Some services going on, some services going on. But then in order to produce services, you might require manufacturing, right? Maybe some kind of manufacturing things are required for different kinds of services. In some services, very little, like business services, you do not require much of manufactured goods. But like gas or construction or other things which we produce, electricity, you require a lot of machineries and etc. maybe. And so that's the backward linkage of service sector. Some services require some, good amount of manufacturing. But if you look the other way around, all kinds of manufacturing we have seen, how much is services required in order to produce one unit? Not much. It hovers around, say, something like 10%, 12%, 9%, 8%. So the question arises that if that is the case, okay, despite you can say in some sectors there is some servicification in the sense they require a little bit more service. But does manufacturing activities really need services? How much services are required as we see from this input-output table, right? All kinds of inputs, their values calculated. Manufacturing sector, in order for its growth, does not require too much of services. But services sector, on the other hand, some of this, electricity, gas, etc., but not too many. The fastest growing services do not require too much manufacturing, but some services sector require manufacturing. I'm leaving agriculture because agriculture, the story is agriculture doesn't require much service. So the impetus, if we say, if the manufacturing sector is given too much prominence, does service sector get a boost? From all the stories I'm telling you, the kind of stories which I'm saying, Make in India, PLI, so much stress on manufacturing sector. But as we said, most of the manufacturing sector doesn't require too much of services. Little bit, servicification, little bit higher services are required because it's some kind of digitalization process, etc., AI services, etc., but not much. So what should I conclude? Should I conclude that manufacturing growth is useless as far as services is concerned? Let me divide it in 2 or 3 things. One is, in order for service sector to grow, as we can see, they require some manufactured goods as well. It's not that a service sector doesn't require manufacturing. So manufacturing has a role to play when we look at the service sector. If we look at the manufacturing sector, apparently manufacturing sector doesn't require that many of services. Okay. So it's the final sector, the household sector, who holds the key. They are the ones who are creating most of the demand for services in Indian economy. Now, I leave it to you also. You think about that. So what would you say? All this stress on manufacturing sector, make in India, does it mean that it's too much stress on manufacturing? No doubt, fine. We go to manufacturing, we have a lot more products which are manufactured. So in that way, are we ignoring, neglecting the services sector in some way or other? That funds or resources are going too much for the manufacturing. Although in services sector, our growth is fastest, services sector exports is fastest, manufacturing sector doesn't use that many of resources. But we have to be a little careful on that. What is the caveat? See that when the manufacturing sector grows, there are 2 effects which happens. One is per unit service required may be not much, but look at the scale. If the scale of manufacturing products increases, there are 2 effects which works. One is per unit intensity, right? The other is the scale. So per unit, suppose I require for 100 rupees of production, 8 rupees of services. But if I make this 100 rupees of production, that was the current production, I grow it to 1 lakh rupees. That 8 rupees which was there for 100 rupees now grows to how much? 80,000 rupees. So that's a boost. So if the scale increases and there is a little bit more servicification, the service is growing a little bit more in this, right? Then clearly, although households, that us, the services which are consuming is important, the scale of manufacturing products is also equally important, because after all, their growth is creating growth for some of the fastest growing services which are there, especially the business and consulting and technical services. Second, and this is going back to macroeconomics, if manufacturing sector grows, right, and manufacturing share goes up, after all, this is creating income, right? And in a sense, remember, manufacturing sector growth, in some sense, creates income somewhat more equally than services sector. Services sector, the fastest growing services sector, produce income in a skewed manner. The skilled workers get lots of job, like global GCCs as we call it, right? They are fast growing. The IT sector is quite fast growing. Business sector, business services are growing. Who gets jobs here? The skilled. How many skilled workers? Few. And most of the workers in India are unskilled. If manufacturing sector grows, both skilled and unskilled gets job. If the service sector grows, especially those services which the fastest growing, is the skilled labor which you're getting job. So inequality goes up. If inequality goes up, think about that. Service which we consume, if the inequality is more, there will be a problem of demand for these services in future. No doubt, households are an important source of service. But if the manufacturing sector doesn't grow in scale, at some point of time, many of the households in India will face problems how to consume the services. So, end story, if we call it, I put thank you and then I explain in one word. Thinking service sector as a standalone sector and putting, some kind of a slogan where service sector led growth. So let's think about services. Why bother so much about manufacturing, agriculture? Service is the fastest growing. So let's put our resources in services. Let's think about services only. Let's think about services will lead us to a new growth path. There is a flaw in this thinking. Flaw is not that all of a sudden you will find that the manufacturing sector is demanding too much services. It's still households who demand the service. But the growth and scale of manufacturing sector and some kind of servicification, because technology is changing, service sector is getting important, especially computing services, financial, business services are getting importance more and more in the manufacturing. If the scale increases in the manufacturing, all sections of income earners benefit. So the final demand which you are creating for services will have a secured growth if the manufacturing sector is given stress. So keeping all this in mind, standalone strategy for service sector will be self-defeating for us. So keep the manufacturing in mind. Keep it along with services and stress the manufacturing sector as we are doing it, because that will keep the service sector moving. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your wonderful lecture. You just covered a wide range of topics and in a certain lucid as well as in a simplified manner where our students got it, and it's really wonderful. So now I'm requesting Socrates sir to open the question and answer session as students wants to ask sir some questions. So we can proceed for the question and answer. Socrates sir, kindly take over the session.
Sir, am I audible?
Yeah, audible sir.
So we have few students who would like to ask sir a few questions, sir, if you don't mind.
Sure.
First, we have Tens. Please introduce yourself, the program.
Yeah.
Speak a little bit loudly.
Yeah, you have to introduce yourself. I can't hear you. I can see, but I can't hear.
Come
Still
to
can't hear.
Sir, am I audible now?
Yes.
Okay, amazing. Sir, I'm Tenthamar from BA Economics, semester 4,
Mhm.
and we're studying topics very related to, the topics that you touched upon today, international economics for one. And so, sir, I'd like to ask, because you assert that the backward linkage effect strongly ties together the manufacturing sector with the services sector. And India is looking to, boost and strengthen its manufacturing sector as well. Steel being one key example that I can think of. So, what do you think the prospects of India's growth in that sector would be? The manufacturing sector and its effect on the service sector, especially with the evolving geopolitical and international factors, with the tariffs, Trump tariffs that are being imposed, and shifting dynamics between increasing Chinese strength in these sectors as well, and that global competitive dynamic.
A good question. Thank you. The you know one thing which is important, which I also said, that service sector growth in India. Service sector is the largest sector. Its growth is not yet driven by exports. It's still domestic, right? So we, the people in India, really we are the driving force for service sector growth. So there may be tariffs and other things which might affect the manufacturing export to a certain extent. But service sector exports, I guess, will not be affected that much. And service sector growth, since it's domestically driven, will not be affected that much. But if you say that manufacturing has a role to play in services, so if there is kind of tariffs which are imposed on our exports of manufactured goods, will it affect us in some way? Some of the manufacturing items here in India might. Some of these competing sectors where, if we reduce the tariff, especially the sectors which are growing sectors, competition will be there. And so, simple logic is, if we do not have a comparative advantage, I don't know whether you have read your international trade. If we really do not have a comparative advantage, we cannot simply survive behind a wall of tariff. So if tariff is reduced and we are really not competitive, we better not devote our resources to that. That's the one answer. And the other is, since services is more domestically driven, we do not need to worry too much about what's going on internationally.
All right, okay. Thank you so much, sir.
Sure.
So my
Introduce
sorry,
yourself.
okay. Good afternoon, teachers. So my name is Gaurangi. I'm from BA Economics second year. So I had a question about the service sector, like related to the challenges that the challenges that India, what are like the key challenges that India faces in maintaining like its global competitiveness, especially in like the service sector, like IT, outsourcing, finance. Yeah.
Well, the point is, India already has established its competitive advantage in services sector. So we need not worry about that. The thing is that we are competitive in some of these services, especially business services, IT related services, all this, we are competitive. We need not worry about that. And I'm quite sure nobody is going to put a tariff on that, because whatever is the case, after all, world is getting it cheap and in a very effectively and in a basically good quality services from India. So we do not need to worry about that. But I again repeat one thing, that is India's growth of service sector is still very much dependent on what we do domestically, right? So we have to look at domestic impetus, which is coming either from us as households directly consuming, like C, which you the C plus I plus G in your macroeconomics identity, right? GDP expenditure side. So C, that's what we do. If the C is maintained, we are safe for the time being. On the other hand, if I is going up in manufacturing, service sector, the scale effect we will get, right? Part of it will also come to service sector. So if we can maintain that, and that's what we are trying, especially manufacturing sector, scale effect, we are okay for the time being, right?
Okay. Yes. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah.
I'm Shivani Patil from BA Economics, fourth sem. So my question is, how can India leverage its strength in service sector to attract more FDIs?
See that you have to understand one thing is FDI and trade. One is investment, the other is trade, right? Trade and investment are very much interrelated. When you are trading in something where it's growing, investment comes. So suppose your IT services are growing, or business services in terms of consulting or other things are growing, your investment automatically will come. See that why Microsoft is opening something in Hyderabad, or why GCCs are there, which are basically centers where innovations will take place. They are all in services. So since we have comparative advantage in services, it's almost like handholding. I mean, trade goes along with investment. They know, the companies know that if they invest in India, their return will be the highest. If they invest the same thing in somewhere else, the return will not be that, because we have a comparative advantage. So we need not bother about investment. It will automatically come so long we can maintain that efficiency and comparative advantage. The investment will not be stopped. The private sector will come in any case. And that's what is happening. Okay?
Thank you, sir.
Sir, can we take a last question, sir? Students. Sir, can we take last question? Yeah. Fine.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Shreya. I'm from MA Economics second semester. My question is service-led growth sustainable in the longer run, especially considering the potential for automation and artificial intelligence to disrupt traditional service jobs?
Well, as I was telling you, if you have noted that, I didn't show the algebra that, it didn't explain the algebra. What I said is growth in service sector is going through a reorganization within the sector. That means some of the services are going down and some of the services are going up. Mainly the resources are released within the sector. It's not coming from outside. So as you were saying quite rightly, so some of the traditional services will not survive maybe. They will be replaced by some of the other more sophisticated services. And that's how the Indian story is. The growth in the services sector is from within, not taking resources from outside. So you're quite right. Some of this will go, some of this will come. And it will be within that sector. And the dynamics will come from within. And that's how the story looks like. Okay?
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Thank you, sir. So I'm requesting Honorable Registrar, sir, to deliver the closing remark. Yeah. Yes, sir. Please.
Thank
Over
you.
to you,
Thank
sir.
you, Sir Soban. And thank you, Ajitav sir. It was indeed a very engaging and enriching discussion. And I was very happy seeing and hearing the questions from students. They were asking very relevant questions, which was on one hand showing that they are eager to learn more about the various nuances of this service sector and its implication on the overall economic growth. On the other hand, they were concerned about how this technological disruption is going to redefine things and where do their interest lies. So it has been wonderful to have this session unfolding various nuances, which was well in time for all of us. And when we look at, as the question came, when we look at any disruption from technology or innovation, so human relevance doesn't get vanished. On the contrary, if you see, every innovation has made us contribute to higher levels of value. In value chain, our contribution goes up. For example, when we are doing everything, all recording manually, we were wasting so much of paper, piling up the registers and all. When it get digitalized, now what we are doing is of higher value. So the person who was maintaining records by making entry has one level of value contribution. Now, when he's managing it digitally and leading it to data uh, curation and analytics, his value addition has gone multifold up. So this is the regular process that evolution continues, and we all learn and grow. It's just a transition that we feel what will happen next, but you need not lose your heart. You are going to do something of better value than being scared. So wonderful. It was wonderful, sir. And I'm really grateful for your time and efforts you brought in. It was on one hand a class where we had wonderful learning. On the other hand, it was a visualization that how things are shaping up. It was indeed a pleasure to have this session. Thank you very much. Thank you, student, for your very meaningful and thoughtful questions. And thank you, faculty members, for your entire effort to get everything working for us for this very enriching learning session. And Sushovan, thanks to you
Yes,
for getting sir
yes,
on board
thank you.
and having us the opportunity, providing us the opportunity to learn from him. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now I'm requesting Ramakrishna, sir, to deliver the vote of thanks and let's conclude the session. Yeah, fine. Thank you.
Yes. So definitely, there's no doubt. I'm audible, no?
Yes, yes, you are audible.
Yeah. So there is no doubt. Absolutely, the service sector acts as a crucial, link between primary and secondary sector, significantly contributing to the, spread out of Indian economic growth and development, especially in reference to Indian economy. Thank you, sir, for your transforming virtual session into an ongoing classroom environment. Okay, since we are in online, so definitely, since we are in, it would be great to have your present offline in the coming days. So formally, we are closing for the today's remarks. A shout of gratitude. Uh, so commencing with good afternoon to everyone on behalf of the Department of Economics, JAIN University, Bangalore. I extend my heartfelt gratitude to all the present for making today's this distinguished lecture series on macroeconomics, trade, and finance as a resource. First of all, I would like to appreciate my deepest congratulations and respect to Dr. Ajitava Ray Chaudhuri, Professor, Emeritus, School of Liberal Arts and Cultural Studies, Adamas University, for delivering an insightful and thought-provoking lecture on the topic service sector lead growth. Can it be stand alone a strategy? Sir, your expertise and deep analysis have greatly enriched our understanding of the subject. We're truly grateful to your valuable time and contributions. Thank you, sir. And connected to that, a special thanks to our Professor Jitendra Kumar Mishra, Registrar, JAIN University, for graciously chairing this session and sharing his valuable insights with his leadership and encouragement. Continue to inspire us to having such a program in the forthcoming days. Thank you, sir. And I'm extending a thankful to our Dr. Tai Afzal our senior academic coordinator, School of Humanities and Social Science, for your guidance and constant support in making this event in such a wonderful manner. And I extend a special acknowledgement that goes to Dr. Sushobhan Mehte, the program coordinator, for organizing this enlightening lecture series and ensuring its success. Your hard work and dedication have been instrumental in bringing together this today's program. Thank you, sir. And also, I extend my sincere gratitude to all my beloved faculty of economics, Department of Economics, School of Humanities and Social Science for their unwavering support and their commitment to the organizing this event, ensuring its smooth execution. Without these people, I don't think so the program will be reach its destiny, where I'll extend my thanks to the all my beloved enriched economic students from the Department of Economics and your enthusiastic participation and showed your engagement and thoughtful provoking questions that made today's sections more meaningful. Last but not least, a big thank especially our admin staff and technical support team for their behind the scene efforts in securing and surviving the seamless execution of the today's event. Your dedication is deeply appreciated. So once again, I'm taking opportunity. Thanks to all for your presence and support. We look forward to many more such enlightening sessions in the future. So once again, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for me an opportunity to appreciate that things. Thank you, sir, once again from my end as well as from the Department of Economics JU-SHSS. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.